Donc aujourd'hui, on est là pour parler du e-commerce en Chine en tant que levier de développement. Je rappelle que les achats en ligne représentent aujourd'hui en Chine environ 800 € par an en moyenne par habitant, ce qui signifie que ce sont des chiffres modestes mais un potentiel énorme en termes de marché. Donc la Chine va entrer dans son âge d'or de l'e-commerce au cours des années à venir, c'est une prévision. Et aujourd'hui, les petites villes et les municipalités rurales sont motrices dans la croissance du e-commerce en Chine. Cependant, dans ce marché, on peut dire qu'il existe de nombreux obstacles encore à franchir, liés aux différences de culture, aux différences de la langue et bien sûr à la distance géographique. Donc les questions qu'on va aborder aujourd'hui, ce sont quelles sont les spécificités du marché chinois, quels sont les défis à relever et comment réussir sur ce marché. Donc pour ça, je vais laisser la parole avec monsieur Lan Tran, chef du digital de Web2Asia. Si vous voulez venir. Voilà, merci.
Bonjour. I'll do the presentation in English. If you don't mind, I'll be more comfortable. Even though I do speak French, so if you have questions at the end in French, it's my pleasure to answer all of that. So today, I think it's a topic where a lot of buzz is being created around the world about what is this China, and China is growing at this gigantic pace. But what we've seen in the last 5 years is China has picked up in e-commerce. So we'll do a little bit tour of what does that mean, where it's going, what we can achieve with China. So we'll go through a little bit about the market size, what's the actual driving force behind it. Online buying at a glance, what does that mean? What do people consume? What do people buy? Very different than in Europe. And actually reaching out the lower tiers, and this is where anybody that wants to join this growth of China needs to think about. And a little bit of prediction of what's going to happen from now on until next year and why any brand should actually think about China as a strategy to expand, to actually gain new business. So like we've said early on, is Jack Ma is one of the leader in terms of e-commerce in China. He owns the Alibaba Group. And he coined the sentence a couple months ago, and he says that China is going to the golden age of e-commerce. So what we've seen so far in the last 5 years is actually nothing compared to what we'll see in the next 5 years. So you think about China as a country, but in reality, think of it as that's wrong. Europe is, and the European Union now, it's an aggregation of all of these smaller countries. Think of the same way for China. So if you look into this map, China's representation of 20, 30 smaller countries. If we just take a comparison by population, what you think of a small village of 10,000 people, I think of a village is 500,000 people. So just because of that, the growth is happening all around China. You know, they have a small province the size of Canada. Germany is the size of Guangzhou, which is in the south. So all of this, the difference in perspective, put what you know about China aside, and let's deconstruct it today for you guys to understand what it actually means. So all of the wealth traditionally is in the East Coast. It's very, very simple. China in the last 50 years was an export country. Everybody came to China to use China as a manufacturing, and everything was being exported. The way to export it, we need the water. So all of the development happens on the East Coast, and that's where all of the money is. But now, as we've moved further along in the timeline, the actual money is going westward. So let's look at where's the money in all of this. Well, there's 650 cities in China. So I'm not counting cities that are the farm. I'm actually counting cities that actually has infrastructure. So let's look into this city level. There's 5 types of cities. Tier 1 all the way down to Tier 5. So the Tier 1 is what most of the people know about China. It's the Beijing, the Shanghai, the Guangzhou for those that does import and sourcing, and Shenzhen area, which these are the traditional economic development zone. Then the tier 2 is capitals of provinces. Tier 3 is bigger cities around those capitals, and it goes all the way down. So if you look into this, there's 4 cities, that's 80 million people. But the whole growth is between tier 2 and tier 5. So whatever you do, that's what we need to put in perspective. So it's very difficult to understand all of these tier cities, and I'll use a different benchmark. I will call it the KFC scale. Instead, everybody knows the Big Mac value. If I can compare the value of a Big Mac meal from one country to the next, well, I'm giving you a different scale for China. The more concentration of KFC stores in a city, the higher in the food chain it is. So KFC's been in China for the last 25 years. It now has almost 6,000 restaurants. So in a tier 1, what it means is there's a KFC here, and across the street, there'll be another one. It's this simple. In a tier 5, it means that the city center, there's a sign that says KFC is coming. The brand is so anchored into the Chinese society, it knows what it is. So that's a great example of how people were able to leverage their growth in China. Right? So what I'm saying is all of the lower tier is where shopping is happening online. Nothing else beats the first tier, and we'll go deeper down into this idea. But before, I'd like to give you a small tour of what China is as of today. So this is a city, tier 5. The city center is just a street, then things are starting to build around it. As we move forward, this is the local method of transportation. It's a 3-wheel scooter that I put a little cage of a simile car on top of it, and it runs on a lawnmower motor. So very, very archaic, very, very simple, but that's the low-level taxi. So streets are being built. This is 120,000 people. It's not small. I'm from Canada. 120,000 people, it's a big city for me, right? But everything is under construction. Nokia is there. We're seeing 500,000 population cities. Shopping malls are starting to be built, like more higher rise as we move up, right? And then in a tier 4, tier 5, I'm starting to see a real shopping mall, as you would say. People can walk in, shop, take their product, and leave. Right? Tier 4, 2.9 million people. That doesn't make sense, right? And then we're going up, like Wuhan, this is the biggest growth in China. We're starting to see international brand reaching out to these levels, right? Pull and Bear, Zara, CNA, Morgan, all of that is coming into China. So we think about this as China infrastructure itself is being built. There's the founder of Netscape, a really, really old browser at the time, and one of their first version. He recently said that retail is dead. Well, actually, retail is dead only in Western world, but in China, we do live in a retail world. And as a brand, as much store as you can open in China, there is no way for you to catch up on 650 growing cities. So let's go now into the digital landscape of things. What you traditionally know as the big 4, Google, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, does not exist. Not only does not exist, Eric Schmidt, founder of Google, recently said, I will not come back to China until there's a change in government. Facebook, nothing will happen. YouTube, nothing will happen. Twitter, even worse. So all of this, we need to look into what is China made of. Well, China is made of every single segment channel. We have either a copycat or we have something that has grown from as a copy of Twitter, and then it's been localized to Chinese taste. So good example, Twitter, and the Chinese version of that is Weibo. Well, Twitter is 140 characters, Weibo is 140 words. So what I'm able to say is very, very, very different. Right? So this is the topic of today, e-commerce. Well, what about e-commerce? What are your options when it comes to e-commerce in China? In the outmost left-hand side is all of these standalone store. As a standalone store in China, there's so many solutions. The people that came to the market that has more case studies is the Magento. We see they have their booth here. There's great companies that does integration of that in China, but your system integrator of Europe has no clue how to adapt, even though it's Magento, into China. So you need to look at that differently. There's Demandware. There's Hybris. Outside of that, not many players, unless you go to something that is unreliable, locally built, and then you'll pay for what you get in terms of quality. Then there's the B2C market. Well, this is something that I do want to push a little bit more today. It's being led by something called Tmall. Tmall is from the Alibaba group, where I took my quotation earlier on. And on the B2C market, they own around 60% of the market. On the C2C level, they have something called Taobao. They own 90% of the market. So this Alibaba group thing, think about as it's the aggregation of Amazon, which is the B2C, and eBay. So you need to look at that very differently. eBay failed in China. It owns less than 2% of the market. Amazon owns less than 4% of the market. They're not player. It's something that you want to build on as your site gets more mature, but it is not something that I would bet myself on. And then let's move down. There's all the way to the C2C, there's the B2C, the vertical, the shopping clubs, all of that. We have our own version of different store, different platforms, and how can you leverage that? So let's go a little bit deeper into this world of this Alibaba world. What it means that the Alibaba group owns B2C, C2C, B2B, commercial, and it's this 800-pound gorilla. Whatever you do in China, we just need to think. It doesn't mean that you need to start with them. What it means is, how can you leverage this dominant player to your advantage? So a page in China is very different. We live in a world of Western, in France and Europe. What it is all of the website is very clean. It's not clogged. Every single thing is visually minimalistic. In China, remove that idea, go to the opposite, completely opposite. Your page will be 5 miles long. You will cram every single bits of information on every single page. That's what it means. Right? This is a Tmall, a B2C platform. This B2C has 70,000. So it's the largest shopping mall in the world, far larger than what Amazon is able to offer. And how can you leverage this? It doesn't mean that as a small or medium brand, you cannot compete. You can. There's definitely room to compete. If you're a bigger brand, you're most probably already looking or thinking what you should do with this. So fashion store example, and this is the other competitor. So as much as Tmall competes on a B2C level, there's this number 2. So Tmall, 55% of the B2C market share. This one is around 20-ish. It's doing a big push this year. So these are the 2 dominant players. How can we actually leverage this? And why should you leverage this? Well, cost of acquisition of a consumer will be very, very low. So in essence, it's the yin and yang of Alibaba. In every B2C and C2C transaction, you will see a drop of Alibaba. It is this simple. It is something that you need to look and how can you leverage that. In the short term, in the long run, that's might not what you want to do. You definitely want to. We will go into a marketplace where the standalone store, your own e-store, will give you much bigger return, but not necessarily as a start. All depend on your brand. So this B2C was always a small fraction of what China e-commerce is. But we've seen this trend where B2C will become half of the transactions. So you as a brand, how can you directly in China not go through a distribution network, but actually go directly to the brand, to the consumer, where you will be able to leverage all of that consumer information? Market size, I've talked a little bit about that, and what we're seeing is there's this boom in China. Like there's this boom, unbelievable. Nobody has seen this growth in the last 10 years. And in the US, what sells the most is consumer electronics. Right? In China, it's not. The need for a Chinese consumer to buy online is not driven by high price, high value item like consumer electronics, iPads, all of the phones. Put that aside. What drives China is the need for apparel, fashion. They want to consume European brands. They want to consume American brands. If you're in that industry, great area to be in. Home improvement, I will not think about the home improvement in terms of like Home Depot, where I can go and buy stuff to repair myself, but I will look into home improvement as small elements that I can add to beautify my house. Groceries, gigantic growth into groceries, and everything related to baby. If you have baby product, you're in the best of the world. Okay, so a little bit of information about the online buying at a glance. So what we're seeing is last year in 2012, China e-commerce is around 1.3 trillion RMB. What we're going to 1.2 trillion RMB, I would say is around 100 to 150 million euros, roughly in that range, and it's starting. Okay, it took us 5 years to achieve this level. What this level took to the US, it took them 10 years to achieve this. In China, it's a span of 5 years. And 2 years ago, they were thinking that China e-commerce will overtake the US in around 2016, 17. Well, there might be a chance that 2013 will already happen. So even statistics cannot keep up on the growth of China. So what this means is, well, 70% of people in mainland China, when they have disposable income, will shop at least once a week. And twice as much as the British, twice as much as the Americans, but 4 times as much as you guys in France. So what this means is, if you walk into an office in China, every single person around lunchtime, they will either sleep on their desk or they will actually shop. And where they will go is all of these all of these offers that people are giving. And it doesn't mean that the basket value will be high. The basket value is actually very, very small. It's like 150 to 200 RMB, 25 to 35 euros. It's very small. Doesn't matter. It's growing. What you want to leverage is the growth. China is not about coming in and saying, I will win right away. It's coming in and take advantage of the next 5 years' growth. So we're seeing, actually, this one, I'll pass a little bit, have something else later on about this. And on Tmall and Taobao there's 50,000 transactions a minute. I've been talking to you for the last 15, 20 minutes. And what we're seeing is, over that course of time, there's almost 1 million transactions that has happened. So it's simple. It's just scale of the market. So mobile transaction, biggest growth ever. The first 4 months of 2012, it's all of the transactions of 2011. Just because of that, and this year it'll be even more. We're seeing more and more offers coming into the market of people looking and thinking how to leverage this mobile commerce. So in the US, we have something called Black Friday, which is the starting point of Christmas sales, right? So in the US, online Christmas sales is around $1 billion US dollars. There's 170 million online shoppers. In China, we have something called Bachelor's Day, Singles Day. And this is very simple. It's 11/11, so the 11th of November, 1111, all of that is a representation in number of singles. So they've twisted around, marketed this to the Chinese consumer. Let's do a big gigantic sales out of nowhere with nothing just because it's 11/11. So look into the amount of transactions, 13 billion RMB, so 2 billion US dollars, twice as much already as the US Black Fridays. That's been there for the last 20 years. Everybody in the US, you see people tackle another person going to a store because when the store opened, it's the biggest discount. Forget about that. The whole industry, and you will read it in the next few months. And I'm sure international newspaper will pick this story about. Look into 11/11, you will see this craziness. And there's a lot of stores can do up to a third of their yearly sales if they bet properly in terms of inventory, in terms of product, in terms of delivery, in terms of everything, if they're able to hedge their bet into this date. So now this year there's also 12/12, so let's see what's going to happen into that. But the sheer size of Bachelor's Day is not something that you can get around with. So this is very interesting. Web2Asia, obviously, we do offer e-commerce consulting and market entry, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to bore you with that. What we've done on this chart, I'm sorry it's not too clear and not too nice, but basically is we've aggregated all of the clients that we have. And where are their sales coming from? This is actual raw data. So if I look into the bigger orange dots, the one on the top, that's where Beijing is. Below that, that's where Shanghai is. And then there's the two dots superimposed at the bottom in the south. That's Guangzhou and Shenzhen. So this is stats that we're seeing that from the first year of an e-commerce store on our platform clients. So if you use a JD and Amazon or all of the other platforms, 50% of their sales comes from these tier 1 cities, right? And all of the rest is below tier 1. So what we're saying is there's so many dots there, it's impossible as a retailer, if you actually have a brick and mortar store, to open sufficient retail level to be competitive. Not only that, that's where all of the growth is. And then if you decide to open a retail in the tier 1 cities, it will be so expensive because the market is saturated. And we'll go into a little bit that afterwards. So I've been like hinting everything is about lower tiers. Everything that you need to think, everything that you need to envision, put aside tier 1. Tier 1 is this area where the L'Oreal, the LVMH, all of these big international brands, they've nailed it. All of that proximity, all of that brand awareness, all of that knowledge, know-how they've got it. They've been there for a long time. But it's the price of retail. It is so expensive that for you to get a return out of that, it's very difficult when you're able to shift something online and able to reach a larger audience to give you a different set of data. And this is where your growth is coming. So let's look a little bit over these tier cities, and what it means is, well, the next decade, this rising middle class of China, it's a small number, but it's still 600 million people. Okay, if a person comes to you and says, China is 1.3 billion, that's fake. Unless you are able to cater to farmers, which most probably we're not able to cater to farmers. Their need is way below what you're able to offer. So our goal is to reach into the rising middle class. Rising middle class, next decade, 600 million people. That's urban people we're talking about, right? And 75% of those are in smaller cities, outside of this tier 1. What we're seeing is the consumer that are buying online in terms of age bracket is the best age bracket. it's 25-35. It's the bracket where people are consuming, experimental, are willing to try something even though they don't know about the brand. They have different reasons why they shop online, and we'll go through that a little bit. And that's your main force to deal with. And as this market gets more mature, well, this age will shift to the high, so you were able to go to 35 to 60 easily because there are people that are helping the parents, for example. So a typical consumer in China. So what is the right persona? When you define something for as a persona, who's the right target audience? How do you define that? Well, let's do as a base. They shop online at least once a week. They are in the middle-low income. They will make around 72,000 RMB a year. That's less than 10,000 euros a year. Okay, so they are making 800 to 900 euros a month. They will spend 300 to 800 RMB online. They will shop on Taobao, Tmall, or 360 most often of the time. And they shop usually for apparel, daily necessities, and home appliances. So if you look into that, very, very different from the high margin of what the US is, where it's consumer electronics, TVs, phones, and all of that. That becomes like fourth and fifth needs for a Chinese consumer. So now we know that this is a typical consumer. The challenge and the opportunity for the tier 1 is, so for every 100 RMB spent in China, there's 57 that comes from lower tier cities. So there's no way you can get around that. If you're thinking of reaching lower tier, you really, really need to think about the strategic positioning that your brand and effort will come. I have a great example about this. I did not want to show you the key visuals in case of the person who works for the brand, but one of our client in the past, they do baby holder, right? So it's the little strap that a person can put in front, put the baby in, and the dad, when the baby is born, is able to carry the baby around. So imagine this key visual is this beautiful, tall, blonde, blue eyes, carrying his baby, walking barefooted on the sand, and he's smiling. I mean, he is an emancipated person. He's confident in his masculinity to be able to carry his baby around. He's happy about it. It works great. Like this visual imaging for Europe, for the US, it's great. I would do it. I mean, as a dad, when I had that, it was perfect. It resonated to me. So think about this. Now let's put it into a tier 3 cities. The first reaction of a tier 3 city in China would be, my God, this person is poor. He has no shoes. He needs to walk on the sand. And he's poor. He cannot get a nanny to carry his baby. Okay? We live in a world where for me to have a person working for me will cost me a couple hundred euros per month. So why should I carry my baby? Why should I break my back? That's not something that I do. That's why I have a person for that. So see, visual representation will mean different things in China, but if you really, as a core, want to go and reach beyond tier 1, that's what you would likely more to correct as an exercise rather than taking something out of here and pushing it into China. To continue on this slide, it's going back, a U, it's a county level, it's a tier 3 level. It managed to sell 3.4 billion, just one city, in terms of volume of purchasing of goods. 3.4 billion, 500 million euros, one city. That's great, easy. If you're able to hit that, that's your market size. But your market size is definitely not 1.3 billion, right? So why are people buying online? Well, let's go back to the level of infrastructure. So initially, I gave the idea that China is an export country. And only in the last 10 years, when the population, that middle class is starting to grow, they're starting to have disposable income, but yet the whole economy that was built around them is everything is to export. There's no infrastructure. There's no shopping center. There is nothing that the multinational and foreign brands cannot come into China to pick on. So their choice in terms of retail around them is limited. It is so limited that they have it all. Now that I have it all, I want to be able to get something new. Online is my destination. I'm price sensitive. This is what everybody thinks what China is. People come and shop online because they want the cheap, the fake. That's false. That's traditional model. Guarantees if there's two identical products, one is cheaper, everybody around the world will go for the cheaper if it's identical. But the price hunter is just a small fraction of the reasons why a China person will go online. It is not the main motivation anymore. I'm lazy. I'm the perfect example of that. I work, and I work. So what do? I buy my grocery online. I buy my baby's product online. I buy my clothing online, and I'm lazy bone category. Variety. Well, variety is a little bit similar than have it all, but they don't have it all yet. They like to be able to show around their friends, I've got something that is very, very different from you. I've got this new brand up and coming. I've discovered this new brand, and they are the one that will be willing to try new products and new brand. And that's a quarter of the reasons to buy right there in this chart. Right? So in terms of what influences a Chinese consumer, well, friends' recommendation all around the world is very important. And throughout the tiers, it's around the same level of importance. If a person that I know tells me something, I'm more willing to buy it. But if we go all the way down, newspaper, TV, all of this traditional marketing, it's super expensive. It is ridiculously expensive to buy a TV spot and a print spot in China. It will be more expensive than what you're paying here, by far. By far. But yet, what you're getting out of that is you're not going to get national coverage. You're going to get something that is a regional coverage that when you would be here in France to pay for a national coverage for that same price. So, and it's not that effective. But all of the other digital elements, price comparison, voucher site, search engine, advertisement on sites, email, social media, that has impact. Tier 3, this is from all of this chart, is email still work. Tier 3 responds so well compared to Tier 1, 20-30% more than on Tier 1. So all of your strategy when you think about tiers is it goes into every single channel you're actually pointing towards to. It is not only building the most beautiful 5-mile-long website, but it also be able to create other channel. So a little bit of prediction of what's coming up and a couple of how-tos. So I want to start with this one. We've moved away from this. This is traditional Chinese guerrilla marketing. It's simple. What it says, if you want to build a business, build a road. If you want to do e-com and digital, use Baidu. But we've moved away from that. Right? So China is very intricate. One of the main issue is, I think that e-commerce in Europe, and particularly in terms of how to drive traffic, it's very reliant on Google AdWords, on this search engine optimization, and that's probably what gives most of the brands a positive ROI where they're able to grow it. But what we're seeing in China is the consumer has shifted a little bit that consumer journey. And the reason is very, very simple. The Alibaba group, or rather Tmall and Taobao, decided to block the crawler of Baidu, which is 70 to 80% of search engine volume in China. So imagine that tomorrow you type on Google and there's no price comparison coming up from Amazon or eBay. People will probably go somewhere else when they want to do that. So when what it comes down to is a person looking online at the awareness level of the journey will probably start in a Baidu search engine. But when you go down to the actual intent to buy a product, and this is where everybody makes their money on, is the long tail of this intent to buy, well, people will not go on Baidu anymore. They will actually start the journey on something as a platform website. So this changed a lot of the ballgame. Suddenly, some of your ROI on SEO isn't that effective. Some of your SCM, your PPC, will not be as effective. And if we go back to how Baidu does SCM, it's very simple. The first 3 to 10 slots on the first page is paid advertisement. In Google, it's the first 3 slots, right? Then if you do SEO, it ranks high and you can leverage that. Well, in China, as much SEO as you want to do on a very competitive term, you'll never be ranked on the first page. So on some terms, you just don't do SEO. It's just money wasted, and more importantly, your time is wasted, and your expectation is wasted. So we need, if we look into this, if we look into that intent to buy comes from some of these platforms, well, we need to be able to think about these platforms in a different manner then. I cannot just take this platform and say, I will generate an ROI of 5 with a certain marketing. What I need to be able to think about is, yes, my marketing will generate a certain ROI, but I also need to be able to leverage this platform as a branding exercise. Just because the intent to buy at that level, I'm able to drive brand awareness level, and through that, people will buy, consume your product. So a Tmall and Taobao isn't only about sales. It is also about brand awareness just because the traffic is there. Delivery. So delivery in China is tricky, if not annoying. So think about you're an international brand. In Europe, the way that it works, it's very, very easy. I order something online. DHL, UPS, any courier company comes in, and they pick up my package. It's wrapped nicely in a box. There's this electronic tracking. When a person comes to my house, he comes from a truck with a uniform, with an electronic pad, and he asks me, please sign here. Great experience for a brand. It's premiumness. It's something that's personalized. Me as a brand, I'm able to see who's signing in the end. Well, in China, it does not happen like this. It's very simple. It's a guy riding his dirty motorbike on the street. Why should I buy a truck when he can feed himself to pedal his bike and deliver my products? He comes in because he rode his bike. It's hot. It's dirty outside. It's smelly outside. How does that reflect? He sweats. He's dirty. He comes in with a little t-shirt that is all blackened with shorts. And that's the first view and perception of what your consumer will see as your brand. And then he gives you this plastic gray envelope that has your product inside. Because it's in plastic and it's an envelope, there's the piece of paper outside, so when you sign, your pen just drives down it. It's not really appealing. So what you see as that beautiful experience is not in China. So in the next year or so, we're going to see a much more consolidation and delivery. There is more international partners that are coming to China to try to solve some of these issues. Even though the DHL, the FedEx are there, they're there on the bigger cities. on lower cities, they subcontract to the local guys. So this delivery service needs to be shifted for a more premium level. Otherwise, that experience for your brand, people will just think you're the same level as a local brand. But don't despair. There is ways, or there should be ways that you do to, after the person experience this, and he opens the gray plastic bag, that he can experience really, truly your brand, either by a good packaging, good communication. So there are elements that you can do in here. This is probably, this year for me, one of the major game changer. So the Alibaba Group bought 47% of Weibo. So think about, in a different perspective, think about Amazon suddenly owning Twitter, right? So Twitter is the ability to be able to write something on real time about my needs, about my feeling, and about what I'm doing. So if at that specific time that my interest has spiked about something, Amazon is able to put in a product description, a product feed, where there's 5 items left, it's been rated 5 stars, 1,000 people has bought it in the last 30 days, and it's happening. So this, for me, it's only starting, but next year we're going to see this more and more of this real integration of social into e-commerce. At that specific time when I'm blogging with my Twitter, when I'm tweeting, if I'm saying, oh gosh, I wish I could have a fresh pair of shoes, and I'm able to drive in because of that word, my product feed that's connected to my Amazon account, and I can do one-click checkout. So this is the type of world where China has always taken ideas and technology from Europe and from the US, and they've taken it over and trying to reiterate it, how things would work, and that will be a great example of a case studies that will be coming up in the next few years. So it's something that's, for me, very interesting because that peak intent is where every marketer, every brand, every person wants to position themselves, because that will be probably your lowest hanging fruit in reaching to them. And the last impact that we're seeing in China this year is the rise of this thing called a WeChat. So in here, you would probably know it as WhatsApp, right? The difference between a WhatsApp and a Twitter is the Twitter is when you talk on a Twitter, it's one to everybody. There's no hiding who can see the message. Everybody sees it. The WeChat is similar thing, but think about it as I can talk to only my fans. So because of that, I'm able to drive two very distinctive approach into this. The first one is customer support. So if you're my fan, I can connect to you directly and use this as a customer support challenge. The second one, well, actually, let's finish the customer support. Customer support in China is the #1 driver of sales. Right? 40% of people in China, when they shop, will actually talk to a customer service representative, not because they want to know a question about your product. They just want to bargain. They want to know, can I get the free discount? Can I get the free delivery? Do you have this in stock? They don't trust information that's there. So 40% is our assisted sales. So it is at your interest to make sure that your customer service is able to provide not only the answer, but to drive sales, like a real salesman. Oh, if you don't like this one, why don't you try the other one? So when you come into a WeChat, a person is able to walk around anywhere and reach out with your customer service. I'm in a store and I want to talk to a person. I don't see anybody around, or I'm shy, or I don't feel like it. I can directly start and talk to people. So that's the extension of integration of customer support, not only online, but actually when I'm offline. Second integration of this is because you're able to talk to a very selective group of which are your fans, well, you can drive promotions to them. The whole point about e-commerce is to drive customer lifetime value, like a recurrent customer. With something like that, you want to incentivize your consumer that, hey, thank you for buying my product, thank you for becoming my fan. For all of those, I'm giving an extra 25% for the next few days, and that's only available to those that has bought and became a fan. So this one to selective group is becoming a very powerful tool of marketing and communication of customer service to for brands. I'm done. And that's it. So, thank you very much. If there's any question, c'est des questions?
What are the means of payments?
It's very simple. There's a couple of options. It's dominated by the Alibaba group again. They have something called Alipay, so which is the equivalent of PayPal. There's China Union, which is the equivalent of the carte bleue system, right? The ATM. And there's Tencent Pay, the owner of the largest community in China. So those are the three options. But in terms of delivery, cash on delivery is still king. People like to receive their product. People like to see it if it's the real things, and they will pay. When I say pay, it's either cash or would swipe your card. Right. Other questions? Yes. Sure. I think the organizers, I gave that to the organizers. Otherwise, give me your business card and I'll send you a copy. Other questions, please? Yes? Yes, we do. It's more about lead generation in that case, or incentivize. You can buy insurance online, but it's very restricted. Banking services is more about lead generation. There's nothing about servicing e-com on that yet. But there's only few companies that are allowed to sell insurance online. Other questions? In terms of internet user, there's like 800-900 million internet users. In terms of smart devices, there's probably around 200 to 300 million. So we are still in the desktop world, but mobile is overtaking everything.
Would we recommend, for instance, small and medium-sized brand first, not their e-commerce through e-distribution, and afterwards have standalone stores?
I would recommend to. Well, it depends again. Depending on if it's not premium or ultra luxury, right? That will not work. If it's something that is in the medium to premium range, it's better maybe for you to start on a platform that your cost of acquisition will be lower.
Yeah, but that would compromise branding. Because I mean, I told you that my brand second got my long page talk with all sorts of other information.
All of the international brands are coping.
They're coping.
But there's different ways to make it clean.
Are there e-corners within these big platforms?
there's a lot of differentiation. There's a lot of different product you can use within these platforms. Yes, that will give the best brand image that you can possibly. I mean, Coach is in there, or even Coach, CK. There's a lot of big brands that are using these. But if you're in the luxury, it might not be the right one. If you're really in the luxury, you want to preserve your brand, an e-store will probably be much more advantageous. Something's easily deployable as a Magento in China that will give you the best quality and time to market.
Do you have any information about the level of in China?
Yes, we do. Glamour sales just failed, by the way, recently. Sorry, not Glamour, Neiman Marcus. My bad. Yes, after 6 months. Well, it depends. It depends on the strategic role they do in the end. Other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Hopefully my English was not bad.